All right, guys. So let's have a discussion about reconnaissance in a realistic civilian context, right? So this will definitely be a multiple part series, at least two, but we'll just play it by ear. So I wanted to go ahead and try to break it down into different pieces. So to start out, let's just talk about laying the foundation for the context about which I'm going to be talking about this stuff. Also, I want to say that I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm not claiming to be an expert, and I'm not telling you that you should do X, Y, or Z. I'm just kind of using this as a thought-provoking piece to get folks to maybe consider some things that they maybe hadn't considered before, and maybe take a different approach to this than what is more commonly observed out in the mainstream, I guess you could say, especially like with YouTube and all the different platforms and so on and so forth. So to lay this out there, I'm specifically discussing a civilian reconnaissance or recon or recce, whatever you want to call it, within the rule of law. And why specifically within the rule of law? Well, because we primarily live within the rule of law, right? And I think that it can put us at a more advantageous position to be able to go ahead and begin implementing and practicing some of these different concepts now. And I think that that's going to help us with the development of SOPs and TTPs or whatever, standard operating procedures, tactics, techniques, and procedures and stuff like that. And I'm using those terms because they're commonly known. They're military terms. So that's why it just makes sense to a broader group of people, more so than me trying to make up some shit that nobody knows what I'm talking about, right? So the work's already been done there. So SOPs and TTPs, this is going to help us, or it could potentially help us as a group, a neighborhood watch, whatever, mutual assistance group, etc., to develop an idea of how we want to approach this subject. So in my opinion, I think it's far more likely that we will need to conduct these types of activities, in rule of law, because as I just previously mentioned, right? So that's why it makes sense to me. So with that being the case, it's going to look a lot different than what we commonly see talked about within the gun tuber sphere and the tactical channels, or whatever, the preparedness channels, whatever you want to call it, right? And the other advantage of this is it also affords us opportunities to test and implement these different concepts, like I say. So I think that's huge, right? Outside of a formal training course or going and taking a weekend class or something like that. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. I enjoy doing stuff like that. But I think this gives us more flexibility in the long run. So just hear me out. All right. So given that bit of framework that I've laid out, right, we're talking about within the rule of law as a civilian, in a civilian capacity. So right out the gate, we're going to go ahead and let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. You won't need your 14.5 or your 13.9 or your 13.7 or whatever hell other barrel length that the internet has said is great for a recce rifle. No LPVOs. You can just leave all that shit in the safe, right? It's not really going to apply with some sort of the picture that I'm trying to paint here, and it'll make more sense as we unpack this, right? Not saying that that's wrong or anything, right? I'm just saying that the way that I'm approaching this and talking about this for this particular series, that shit doesn't really apply. So let's talk about use cases, right? So that we can begin to develop a recon-focused element for our team, our neighborhood, our family, whatever it may be, right? Whatever we have at our disposal with the people that are available to us. So the most obvious reason why we would want to go about conducting reconnaissance and gathering information and intelligence would be for an ongoing area study. So area study is its own subject pretty much in a nutshell, but it's basically a continued effort to understand your immediate AO or area of operations. That just means your area, your county, whatever, your city, your town, and whatever, it's just a fancy word for your area where you live, right? Your immediate surroundings. So what do I mean by that? That means recognizing threats, assets, and liabilities, or weaknesses, right? And those could be your own weaknesses. That could be other folks' weaknesses. That could be a potential adversary's weaknesses, etc. Because that could be important information for us. That definitely is important information, whether we have to capitalize on it or not, right? So if you want more like a really deep dive into that stuff, there's a lot of people that are way more suited to speak on that than me. And one of the ones that comes to my mind is Forward Observer's channel here or wherever I post this, but he's on YouTube, right? Forward Observer. Go check out his channel, and he can go and unpack all this stuff far better than I ever could hope to, because that's what his background was in the military, right? So great guy, great channel. Go check him out if you haven't already. But anyway, so that's one of the more obvious reasons, right? An area study, which is going to be an ongoing thing. It's constantly changing, and you may have to add stuff to it, information to it, and you may have to remove different items or information from it as the situation around you changes, right? That's just the way it is. So let's say just another example, and we're not going to beat this dead horse, but I just wanted to list a few examples, and there could be any number of them, right? So let's look at you may be in a position where you need to gather information on some sort of a criminal element in your area. It could be a gang, it could be some damn meth head tweakers, it could be anything, right? I mean, people are weird. You got people strung out on dope. You got people doing weird stuff all over the place, right? No area is immune to that type of stuff, right? It may vary by area, but there's always something going on somewhere, even if we don't see it, especially if we don't see it, right? And this is about figuring out how to see that stuff so that we don't get caught off guard. So, but again, this ain't about like playing police or Miami Vice and it or any of that funny shit, right? It's really about gaining an understanding of a potential threat so you may better respond to it if or when that becomes necessary, right? And I am reading notes here, guys, because this one I had a lot of information in my mind, so I was like, let me just make some notes at least to kind of guide me through this conversation, because I wanted to be able to express my thoughts clearly. So, like I said, that could be about, gaining an understanding of a potential threat, right? And you may or may not need that information, but if you have it, then you have it, and you're going to be at a better position in the event that you do need it. So it's not gonna hurt you to have that information available to you. Also, it gives you a reason to play with the expensive toys that you and the homies have been accumulating for the last few years, right? So that's cool, right? And we'll talk more about that in what will likely be part 2, right? So example number 3, maybe you and your group, whatever, are needed or called upon to coordinate with some sort of a non-governmental organization, an NGO, whether it be a nonprofit or, you can think of a few, kind of like maybe what Bear Independent does with Grindstone Ministries. You got other folks doing stuff for human trafficking. That seems to be, I won't really say common, but I've heard of several non-governmental organizations that have taken that on as their bread and butter, which is a great cause, right? I think we can all agree on that. You could even be tasked with some sort of a mission with the local sheriff's department, right? And in some sort of a eyes and ears capacity, so to speak, right? Maybe it's some sort of a criminal group or some folks doing nefarious activities. You can insert whatever that may be or may likely be for you in your area. So again, it's kind of a broad spectrum of things that this could be useful for, which is why I like it. Also, you can think about in terms of a neighborhood watch, consider like observe and report, which is typically what like security guards do, right? Which is not really a glorified or sexy thing in and of itself, but it's still important, right? It's still important to be able to make those observations and gather that information so that it can be developed in the intelligence, which can then be acted upon if necessary. again, I'm sure that the list could go on and we could talk about different scenarios and examples. We could probably do that for an hour, right? And I'm sure that you guys are probably thinking of some now that I'm talking about this, which is, if that's the case, then that's a good thing. That means that I'm succeeding in my goal here, because that's what I want to do. Is I want to get you thinking, and I want to get you thinking outside of chest rigs and rucksacks and all that kind of shit. All that's great, but that doesn't necessarily paint the whole picture for us as civilians, right? Not necessarily ghillie suits and all this other cool shit. All that's cool, but this is also cool, and this is more reasonable and more likely, and this is stuff that you can start exercising now if you choose to, right? Within the rule of law, and you're not doing anything illegally, and that's the beauty of it, right? You're not a criminal, you're not a bad person, you're just exercising these different concepts and implementing them, and that's important. That's training, right? That's training and practice. That's a big deal. We talk about that all the time. So, I hope that's kind of clear what I'm getting at here, and I'm gonna go ahead and try to kind of bring this thing around full circle and kind of close out this particular portion of the segment, right? So, with everything that I've said, we know that we got issues. We saw the stuff that just happened in New Orleans. We saw a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device blown up in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Things are weird. Things have been weird for quite some time in this country. And, here in the wake of unchecked immigration and pretty much an open southern border for the past almost 4 years now, under this current administration. And it's never been perfect, right? So, but it's been pretty bad, right? I think that's pretty clear to see. So with all of that being the case, we're likely in for some form of chaos going forward, right? We're already seeing a little bit of it. On New Year's Eve, we saw a little bit more of it with the vehicle attack and stuff in New Orleans. Things just tend to get shitty. And that could be due to any number of factors, of course. So open border aside, as we've witnessed countless times, we got our own crazies, native crazies, people that have been here their whole life for multiple generations that just lose their shit and just go off and do, commit atrocious and heinous acts. It happens. It happens all the time. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Evil has a way of showing up and just making shit bad. So that's the way it is. But I think that's an important factor for us to take this stuff seriously, and to also kind of self-reflect and assess the way that we are approaching training and stuff like that with our groups. And if we don't have groups, then we need to be building groups. We need to constantly be improving our groups if we do have groups, and continuing to look for like-minded individuals who want to help and serve their communities. It's a big deal, right? So hopefully, I think that has pretty much displayed or touched on my thoughts here that I want to convey it with you guys here on part one. And in part two, we will likely begin to explore most probable equipment and gear and tools, etc., that can be utilized. And like I said, I'm not coming at you from a position of, hey, I'm an expert because I was a Recon Marine or whatever that looks like, for those guys that done that kind of stuff. But what I've seen is that typically when we look at a lot of the information that's available out here on the internet, it's when you start talking about recce or reconnaissance or whatever, we start to see this pretty consistent drift to, gear like this and overt setups and chest rigs and stuff like that. We typically see chest rigs involved with that, and LPVOs on mid-length gas system, ARs and all that. And I think that we're kind of possibly overlooking a potentially more likely scenario where we could implement some of those same skills to gather information. And this is something that I think that we could be doing right now without getting ourselves in any kind of trouble or being weird or anything like that. I think that's a big deal, and it's something that I will wanted to just come here and bring to you guys because it was kind of rattling around in my head. So that's what I got for part one, and that is just basically the framework and context of my take on the concept of civil or civilian reconnaissance, or recce, whatever you want to call it, right, within the rule of law. So there you go, guys. I appreciate it. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I appreciate everybody that supported Palmetto Dissident. Appreciate all the folks that shopped at palmettodissident.net in 2024 and the folks that made purchases so far in 2025. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate the way you guys continue to show up for me. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, and that'll be a big deal for me. So I'll see you guys on the other side. I'm out.